my name is Ben Freeman. Welcome to the Beniverse. Today on my channel, I am talking about every film that I saw in the year 2021. I've seen so many films this year. At this point, I've seen 75, but there will probably be more actually in this video because it's going to be a few days of me editing and processing this. So we're just going to get into it. I've solidified my list as best as I can. There's still about 5 movies I want to see as this list comes out, so the total number is probably going to be closer to 80. But with this, let's just start at the very worst of 2021. Coming in dead last is Tom and Jerry. And listen, I know this is a kids movie. It might be low blows for these movies to say, are these really the worst of the year? Here's my defense of Tom and Jerry. The original source material, the cartoon, is really funny, really holds up, and the slapstick humor is great, and I think it was great for kids and adults now. And the fact that they just take away the essence of Tom and Jerry, put it all on the focus of the live action characters in this movie, and the fact that Tom and Jerry, the CGI animation for them, look atrocious. So for all of those reasons, it's unwatchable, and it just makes the worse because maybe this wouldn't have been the best of the year, but it could have been a fun, entertaining movie. Coming in second to last is SpongeBob, Sponge on the Run. And again, another kids movie. And this one actually hurt me a little bit personally because I love SpongeBob. I love the SpongeBob SquarePants movies. I love a lot of those early seasons. SpongeBob was something I grew up as watching as a kid. And this one just has none of that fun charm and lovability of the character. We're just stripping away what was so fun about SpongeBob and making it so generic and boring and just bright colors but with no substance. That's why it gets so low on this list. Kate, starring Mary Elizabeth Winstead, is a brutally boring action movie that had the potential to be great but just never lives up to the premise of how great Mary Elizabeth Winstead is as an action star. It makes her just feel lame. She doesn't seem to have any real strength, and the story is boring, and it wastes Woody Harrelson as a villain, which when you do that, it's not going to make it high on this list. From the start, Lockdown was a terrible premise for a movie. Let's take the thing that's been driving the culture and just our lives for the past year, and in a time where escapism is needed so much, the fact that Lockdown comes out about COVID, and it's just like it's poorly timed. Chiwetel Ejiofor and Anne Hathaway do everything they can to save this movie, but ultimately it is just a really lame heist film and doesn't even use the COVID premise that it promises, in the sense that it's my biggest issue with this movie. When they are doing the heist, no one is wearing masks, and this film is set in COVID. How is that even possible? So for that, it's just a disaster and a mess. Mortal Kombat is a movie that by all means should have worked in its stupid action, and for the first 10-15 minutes they hit this tone great, and the action's awesome. These characters are fully realized. It's just bloody, insane fun, and then it loses all steam and falls off of a cliff. This movie becomes so generic and boring and doesn't even play with the Mortal Kombat story or whatever you want to call it. And ultimately, like I said, not only does it just fall off the cliff, it just ends up being so boring and generic. You've seen this film hundreds of times, and for that, it's just not a good film and one of the year's worst. Fast and Furious 9, which, if you recall, this was my first review to be out on the Beniverse channel, and boy did I not like this movie. And one of the reasons I did not like this movie is, again, I saw this movie in 4D, so I got sick watching this movie. But strip away that, a redundant movie. You've seen the Fast and Furious, and they don't do anything fun with it. They lose the characters of The Rock and Jason Statham, which you don't actually realize how important those characters were to adding charisma and charm to this. And then you bring back characters who have died. You just do so much wrong, and the action's not even fun, and everything feels melodramatic. Home Sweet Home Alone. This movie's weird. The fact that the burglars aren't even burglars in this movie, so when the third act violence happens against them, you just feel bad, is a really big problem. And yeah, this film has laughs to be sure, but ultimately it's just the story's so weird and bad and poorly conceived that it's just not a fun watch, and one that doesn't do anything to help the legacy of the Home Alone franchise. All right, my first review where I'm actually probably going to get in trouble for saying this. The Power of the Dog, starring Benedict Cumberbatch, Jesse Plemons, Kirsten Dunst, is boring as all hell. I don't understand how anyone could like this movie. The story is dismally slow. Character motivation is weak at best. You've seen Benedict Cumberbatch give this performance. You've seen Jesse Plemons give this performance. While they're fine actors doing fine roles, there wasn't anything unique. And the fact that Kirsten Dunst is getting so much praise for this role, I was shocked because I thought she was bad in this movie. This, like I said, if I had to describe it, I would describe this movie as melodramatic and boring. I don't understand how anyone likes this movie. I loved 2018's Halloween. I really wanted to like this movie. I really liked the Michael Myers franchise, the characters, all of that. And I was really excited to see Michael Myers back and on a rampage. But ultimately, this film's premise is so stupid, and they put Laurie Strode in a bed the whole time. She doesn't get to have any form of character development or get to do anything cool, get to go against Michael Myers. So just focuses on Judy Greer, who is a good actress. And ultimately, everything that happens in this movie is just so dumb, and the decisions made are so bad that you just can't help but root for Michael Myers. Yesterday on Disney Plus. Now, I'm actually going to say that this is probably far not one of the worst films of the year. It is just a film not made for me, but it is generic, it's lighthearted, it's good message for kids. Ultimately, it is made for like 5 to 7-year-old range. So while it's fine in that retrospect, it means it's not going to make it any higher on this list. This is again a film that probably does not deserve to be this low on the list. Moxie, directed by Amy Poehler, is actually a sweet, innocent enough Disney Plus movie with cute performances from all the leads. Amy Poehler does a good job as the mom. The story is a feel-good, heartwarming tale about friendship. Ultimately, again, it's one of those issues where there's only a level that this film can get for me, and that is standard at best. And this one's just, it's subpar, but there's going to be an audience that loves it and grows up with this movie, and I totally understand why. But for me, it just can't get really any higher than just okay. Another shocker. I did not like Luca. I thought this film was boring. I thought there are scenes in there that are trying to make you cry and feel emotion, but ultimately these characters are just boring. I didn't have any real connection to them, and I was just looking at my clock the whole time. While it is beautifully animated, you can't take that away from Pixar. It just is not one of their best, and I just ultimately did not have fun watching this movie. Another weird shocker. I did not hate the Cinderella remake. I thought this movie was perfectly serviceable and had some really good music sequences, some really catchy songs, some fun performances from Camila's really good. Idina Menzel gets to have fun as the evil stepmother. Billy Porter really steals the movie. Plus, there's some really well-directed musical sequences by Kay Cannon. So ultimately, is this film good? No, not really, but is it enjoyable enough? I've had enough fun with it despite the fact that it's about 20-25 minutes too long. Chaos Walking came out this year, and I was just as surprised as everyone else. I heard nothing about this movie when it came out, and I saw this available to buy on Blu-ray, and I had totally forgotten it was supposed to come out. So I saw it, and it is serviceable at best, mediocre in reality. Tom Holland gives a decent enough performance. Daisy Ridley's too old to be the character that she is in the film, but ultimately they have a good enough chemistry that kept me invested, despite some weird performances from supporting actors like Nick Jonas, like Mads Mikkelsen. It's a really standard YA movie that you've seen and you know all the plot beats. I did not understand the praise some people had for A Quiet Place Part 2. Ultimately, while I love the first Quiet Place, I don't think there needed to be a sequel, and I think that's also the film's biggest issue. The story takes a step back from how smart it was to the first, to just feeling poorly conceived in the second one. Emily Blunt doesn't get as much to do. While the children give great performances, a lot of the new supporting characters just don't add anything to the story, and ultimately the scares just weren't there. Hopefully for a sequel they can kind of get back on track. But yeah, Quiet Place 2 was not a good movie. Wrath of Man, starring Jason Statham and directed by Guy Ritchie, was not a good movie. In fact, it's quite a bad movie, but my God, did I have fun with this movie. The action is crazy at times. Jason Statham plays the ultimate badass. The issue is Statham is not on screen enough, and he's not the main character for large portions of this film. So there's about 15 to 20 minutes of a extremely fun action movie filled with another hour and 40 of dull and poor writing. But let me tell you, Rob Delaney's character in this movie is so poorly written that it's hysterical, and I was laughing the whole time in the theater. Bad movie for sure. I'd watch it again though, despite the fact that it was really bad. Black Widow has Scarlett Johansson and Florence Pugh in its favor, and for the first 40 minutes I was invested in this movie. I thought the action was great, I thought the story worked, and then ultimately it just becomes a standard spy movie that I think is downgraded due to the fact that I think David Harbour's character and accent is too ridiculous to take seriously, and it just, like I said, it just becomes a film you've seen 100 times with very generic action. Speaking of movies that start off well and then lose all sensibilities, you have The French Dispatch, directed by Wes Anderson. God, I wanted to love this movie, and for the first 20 minutes I was really invested in this movie. It's the film, if you don't know, it kind of goes by vignette by vignette by vignette. I think in total there's about 4 to 5. And the first 1 to 2 I was pretty invested in. And I really liked the character Benicio del Toro plays in the film. And I thought that was by far the best aspect of the film. But as the film went on, it felt very Wes Anderson, but without the cleverness and without the fun of what brings Wes Anderson. All these characters just kind of melded together, and there just wasn't a lot of joy to be had, which was really disappointing. Willy's Wonderland is Nicolas Cage in a Five Nights at Freddy's type story. And that's all you need to know about this movie. It's dumb, and it's fun, and it's bad, but I knew it was going to be bad, and it delivered on that badness I was hoping for. And Nicolas Cage is Nicolas Cage. What else can I say? I noticed I'm a lot more lenient with films that are bad, but at least have something new to say or try to do something new in the medium. And that's how I feel about M. Night Shyamalan's Old. Technically, this is worse of a movie than a lot of the movies I have behind it, but I liked that M. Night was trying something, and while it ended up being a failure due to its story and some poor acting, I liked how ambitious it was and the story it tried to tell, even if the second and third act really fall apart. But the first act, I think he had a really interesting idea, and I just wish it came together more. The Lost Daughter is a great directorial debut for Maggie Gyllenhaal, in which she's able to showcase her ability to work with actors and actresses and get great performances out of them. And it shows also what I was really impressed with was her ability to film and create tension and anxiety. Ultimately, though, this movie didn't go anywhere, and I already said I thought it was poorly marketed, and I just think by the end, this movie didn't have as much to say as it thought it did. So it didn't connect with me, and I also understand that I'm not a mother, so there are parts of this movie that are going to connect more with mothers, and I totally understand that. And I think this is a well-directed movie with just a story that I did not like, but it has a lot of great parts. The Tomorrow War is in a genre that I typically have fun with, which is sci-fi action, and it has a leading man who I'm a fan of in Chris Pratt. This movie has a lot of cool ideas that are not the greatest executed, but there is some really cool action. Chris Pratt gets to be a good leading man alongside with J.K. Simmons. The action is well directed by Chris McKay, and ultimately not the best of the year by far, but enough to keep me entertained for the runtime. I know for a fact I am going to rank Candyman way higher on this list when I see it a second time, but let me explain why it's so low right now. I did not know Candyman was a sequel to the 1990s film. I thought it was a reboot. So when I watched it without seeing the 1990s film, I was really confused on a lot of the story beats. But the direction is there, the story is there, the performance is there. This film had a lot of things that work. There are some really creepy scenes in there and some great violence and horror in it. I just needed to see the first one, and that is ultimately my fault, but that's why it falls so low in this list. Again, I guarantee you when I see it a second time, it's going to skyrocket. Till Death, starring Megan Fox, follows a woman who finds herself chained to her husband, who kills himself in an attempt to basically punish her for something that she has done in her life. It is a crime thriller. It works for a large majority of this film, especially in its second half. It takes a little bit too long to get to the main meat and potatoes of this story. Once it gets into her being chained to her dead husband, this movie works, and it works pretty well on its thrills and in terms of its suspense. Megan Fox gets better as the movie goes on, and by the end I thought she was a fairly compelling lead. Till Death is a good thriller film. The Eyes of Tammy Faye has two great central performances in it, with Jessica Chastain and Andrew Garfield, who deliver in spades in this movie. The issue is, outside of them, this film is generic, and you've seen it 100 times. It's a very traditional rags to riches, back to rags story, and I think the film works because of these performances. Outside of it, it has nothing new to offer. A lot of you found me through my review of Don't Look Up, which is by far my most popular review on my channel, and one that was actually quite frankly surprised became as popular as it was. And I know for a fact a lot of you disagree. Bring it on. I know this movie did not connect to me. I thought it was really smug. I thought There was really nothing to say. I thought Adam McKay handled this subject material poorly. I didn't think his direction was particularly clever, and I thought his writing was even worse. And while there is some funny performances, with this story is so bad and it's still poorly inconceived, and I thought it was loud but had no real substance behind it. Passing is a movie that I want to see again as well. It is well directed by Rebecca Hall and features a great leading performance from Tessa Thompson, and Ruth Negga is really good in the supporting role as well. I didn't connect with this movie, but I think knowing the premise now, going back into it, this is a film that I feel like could mature really well and be one of those films that while I didn't like on the first viewing as much, I'm going to come to appreciate it over time. But at this moment in time, it's kind of middle in the pack. The Green Knight. I need to see this movie again. My first impression of it was I thought Dev Patel was really good. I thought the direction good, and I thought the cinematography was absolutely gorgeous, with some of the creature designs being wonderful, but ultimately I didn't remember it particularly well, and I thought the story was a little too confusing and too weird. After I read the poem that this movie is based on, I liked it a little bit more, but going in blind actually kind of hurt my experience and led it to be a movie that I appreciate. Being the Ricardos worked for me in the sense that I like Aaron Sorkin and I like Javier Bardem, and Nicole Kidman is obviously just amazing as Lucille Ball based on her win. A lot of people know that, and she is clearly one of the front runners for this year's Academy Awards. Ultimately, it's again kind of that same issue where it's a standard biopic and it doesn't have that Aaron Sorkin feel, style, and flair to it that it's kind of keeps it fast paced. I thought a lot of this film was dull, and while I liked good chunks of this movie, I was also bored, and I thought the whole communist plot really could have been taken out of this movie, and you really could have just focused on Lucille Ball's relationship to her husband and the infidelity, and I thought that would have made the drama stronger. I like Eddie Murphy and I like Arsenio Hall. I love the first Coming to America, and ultimately Coming to America is fine and has a few good laughs in there and enough to keep me entertained. I've had fun with this movie. It's not a great movie, but I just love seeing Eddie Murphy back on screen as this character, and I think he just delivered as best he could with such a lackluster script. Malcolm and Marie has two fantastic leads in John David Washington and Zendaya. I liked their chemistry so much, I just wish the story around it was better. It's again what I had issues with Don't Look Up. I have the same issues where it is at times just a mouthpiece for the director Sam Levinson to just kind of just get his point across, and there's this really funny monologue where Sam Levinson just goes off through John David Washington to about 10 minutes on a critic, and it's so self-serving and so dumb, and when you read the whole story about it with this critic from the LA Times, it just feels so childish. And fantastic performances with such palpable chemistry with just such a lame script behind them. This is an example of true actors being so charismatic that they can lead a very generic film. And that's what The Rock and Emily Blunt do in Jungle Cruise. This film is a very generic action movie based on an IP, but ultimately The Rock and Emily Blunt have enough chemistry to lift an otherwise lame film and make it enjoyable. Every time Godzilla and Kong fight in this movie, it's great. There's just not enough of it, and I spend too much time with human characters. I will rewatch the fight sequences with those two, and of course the end with another returning character coming back. Take out all of that, this film has nothing for me. While I have hesitations of Tom Hardy in the role of Venom from the first film, the second one he gets to have even more fun and be way more over the top and ridiculous with it, and the comedy's there between Eddie Brock and Venom. Nothing else really in this film works. They deal with Carnage way too quick, Woody Harrelson's a little too cartoony. They don't get to do much with this premise, and this film is really only talked about, it feels like, for its end credit sequence, which once you even see Spider-Man No Way Home isn't even that impactful. So this movie is good for what it is, and it's a showcase of how talented Tom Hardy is and how much of a leading man that he could take this poor premise and make it an enjoyable ride through it. Find a list of the films of 2021 that talks about private chat. I dare you, because it probably doesn't exist, because I'm one of the few people who saw this movie and I actually thought it was good for what it is. It's really low budget, it's at times poorly acted, and they don't have the equipment and money to really do a lot with this premise, but ultimately we saw in Uncut Gems that Julia Fox is a great actress, and I think she's able to showcase this part of life that we don't get to see, a little bit more of this seedy underground New York feel to it, of just kind of sex modeling. She owns this role, and I think she is going to be one of the hugest stars in like 5 years. So this is going to be a film that a lot of people are going to retroactively watch to kind of get a sense of, wow, how talented is Julia Fox? I laughed way more than I should have at Hitman's Wife's Bodyguard, and it's ultimately because Ryan Reynolds and Samuel L. Jackson have great chemistry and they make the jokes land. And yes, is this film dumb? Yes, but I laughed so much that I just had to put it this high on the list. It is a completely enjoyable 100-minute watch, and one that I'll watch again just for some of those comedic beats. Some of those comedic beats that Reynolds and Samuel L. Jackson hit, pitch perfect. I literally hear you all yelling at me. The fact that you have Power of the Dog lower, you have Don't Look Up, you have Passing, you have all these films that are obviously way better and have more to say than He's All That. I hear you, I understand. I like this movie. It's my type of genre, it's my type of cheese, it's my type of comfort movie. You can't take that away from me. And yes, this movie should not work as well as it did. I ended up giving it a 3-star review. I stick by that, and I think this film has a lot of fun for somebody who likes these types of films. And this is going to be one of those films, again, you hear it all the time with He's the Man, or you hear it with Cinderella Story. All these films from the early 2000s, either starring Amanda Bynes, Hilary Duff, young Emma Roberts, Lindsay Lohan, where it's like, at the time, poorly received. 10, 15 years later, people grew up with it and loved this movie. I don't love this movie, but I enjoyed this movie. What can I say? The Tender Bar, directed by George Clooney, is a standard, conventional, heartwarming film that features a great supporting performance from Ben Affleck. It is endearing and charming. It hits this kind of comfort middle level of just good and just a good time to spend 100 minutes with these characters to feel inspired. That's what this film is, and I thought it did well in that. Tragedy of Macbeth, directed by Joel Coen, one half of the Coen brothers, starring Denzel Washington and Frances McDormand. If you wanted a really well done Shakespeare adaptation of Macbeth, look no further than this. I have never been the biggest fan of Shakespeare, thus this movie had a limit to how good it can be, because it is that. It's an adaptation of Shakespeare. Denzel Washington is amazing as Macbeth, and Frances McDormand does a great job as Lady Macbeth. Ultimately, this film, I just didn't care for it just because it is Shakespeare, and I don't always tend to like the Shakespearean language, but if you're a huge fan of Shakespeare, you're going to love this movie. I love the A24 flair to this movie, and its cinematography is top notch. Assassins is a documentary about 2 young women who believe they are part of a prank that ultimately ends up leading to the death of Kim Jong-un's brother and the scandal behind all of that, and showcasing how North Korea manipulated these two women to basically do their bidding. It's shocking, it's extreme, it is fascinating. Also does a great job of showcasing how media can be used to broadcast propaganda. Cry Macho. Cry Macho is the latest film from director Clint Eastwood, who's 90 plus years old, and I kind of can't believe he's still directing movies and starring in them. Here's what I'll say about Cry Macho. You see why Clint Eastwood is a star. His ability to just hold your attention on screen is unlike anybody else's. He just has a presence that is felt, and this movie isn't great. It's a pretty conventional kind of Western drama, a little bit more heartfelt, but ultimately I watched this movie because of Clint Eastwood, and it's kind of amazing that he still has it to this day. Titane is a French body horror film that really works largely due to its crazy premise and balls to the wall direction from Julia Ducournau, I believe is how you pronounce her name. This film is one of the craziest films I've watched all year. Cinematically, this film looks gorgeous, and I still can't determine if I loved it or hated it, but it is so unique, it is so wild, and it's so visceral that I had to just respect this movie, and I'm going to be thinking about this movie for a long time. Snyder directed 2 movies this year, and this is definitely the lesser of the 2 in Army of the Dead. Now let me say this, the opening action scene in this film is awesome, with Viva Las Vegas being one of the best needle drops of the year. And after that opening credit scene, I thought this film was going to be amazing. Ultimately, it's just good. The action never quite reaches that peak, and the film peaks way too early for its benefit, and it's way too long at 2.5 hours. But I like Dave Bautista as the leading role. But this film is just that it's too long and it's just too poorly written. But I mean, Zack Snyder can direct action all day, and I'm always going to be on board for it. And there are some wicked, nasty action scenes in this film that I really appreciated. I know this movie isn't particularly good, which is why it doesn't make it in the top 15. I'm gonna rewatch scenes from this movie all the time. It is this weird meta examination on its own existence and the franchise and legacy of The Matrix. Does this film work a lot of the times? No. Does Keanu Reeves and Carrie-Anne Moss get to do as much as they originally did with Neo and Trinity? No. Is there really any reason to re-bring this film back? No, but the film also seems to understand that and plays off of it, and this is a weird meta trippy film that almost seems to be airing itself down and pointing out all of the criticism so you can't do it. And yes, it's a mess, but my God, I had so much fun with this mess. Going back and looking at my list, I was kind of surprised how many really good films came out in 2021. And In the Heights is no exception. This film is really good, and it has some great music, some great cinematography, some wonderful music sequences, great leading performances, and it just has a rhythm and beat and style to it that I thought was endearing and charming. And while it doesn't hit the heights of pun intended, while it doesn't hit the heights of Lin-Manuel Miranda's later work with Hamilton, it is definitely a good showcase of the guy beginning to show his talent and setting up the groundwork for kind of the rhythm and style of Hamilton. The Harder They Fall has this great energy to it, just this great rhythm and style, and just featuring great leading performances from Jonathan Majors. Idris Elba come in there as the villain. You get to have Lakeith Stanfield steal the show as the ultimate badass. You get Delroy Lido in here as a great supporting role. Zazie Beetz. This film has a lot of style and feel and amazing action, and while it never hits the heights that I wish it did, there are certainly a lot of really good action scenes that I will rewatch, even if this movie's too long for me to probably put this movie on often. Sue me, I grew up with the first Space Jam, and I love NBA, and LeBron James has been one of my favorite stars for years, and I love the Looney Tunes, and I'll watch anything they have in this. And yes, was the IP way too on the nose? Of course it was. Were the jokes a little childish? Of course they were. I could just spend all day with these characters and this premise, and give me Space Jam 3, 4, etc., etc. I know they're all going to be bad, but I'm going to eat them up, and I'm going to love it, and I'm going to buy the jerseys like I did for this movie. Anyone who listened to Branson and my podcast on this movie knows that I am not always the biggest animation fan, and I think that's ultimately why this film didn't fully connect with me, because I guess I have a bias against the genre. But this movie is really well done. It has a lot of funny laughs and a lot of great performances, especially Danny McBride as the father. Bobby Jacobson does a really great job, and their chemistry together, it just lands. And I like the movie. I wanted to like it a little bit more, but there was certainly a lot of fun to be had with this movie. John Cena is quickly becoming one of my favorite comedic leading men, and Vacation Friends is just that. It's a showcase of John Cena's comedic talent, which is on point, hysterical excellence. I thought this film had so many laughs, and yes, while it does get a little derivative, while it does get a little too extreme, and it does get a little too wild, this film has its laughs for sure, and there are a lot of moments where I had trouble breathing because of how hard I was laughing. Ridley Scott's The Last Duel, starring Matt Damon, Ben Affleck, Jodie Comer, and Adam Driver, is a film that I wanted to like a little bit more. I think all the performances are there. I think the story's there. I thought it was a little too long in 2.5 hours. And by the end of it, I understood what they were going for, but there was just something emotionally missing for me from this movie. Despite all of that, it does feature great performances from all of these actors and actresses. And I thought it was a really interesting film, and one that really just shows that Ridley Scott can still direct movies. Daniel Kaluuya and Lakeith Stanfield deliver amazing performances in Judas and the Black Messiah, and this is a really good biography of these two characters, and it's one of those ones where you've seen it and it's kind of beat by beat, but you're just so engrossed by the story, their performances. I thought that the director Shaku King did a really good job directing this movie, and it's one of the ones that I will definitely rewatch from time to time. And yeah, Daniel Kaluuya just fantastic as Fred Hampton in this movie. In terms of performances, House of Gucci had the highest highs and the lowest lows. Lady Gaga and Adam Driver deliver it in this movie, and Jared Leto, I don't know how to describe him in this movie. It is weird, and I still don't know if I liked it or disliked it, but let me tell you, it is there, and it's a lot, and that accent is ridiculous. But again, it's one of those things, great story, know where it's going to go, but great performances for the most part. Adam Driver and Lady Gaga lead this film, and it is an interesting 2.5 hour watch as somebody who did not know the Gucci murder at all. I was invested, and while it's not one of the year's best and it's a pretty standard biopic, I liked what it had to offer. When I originally watched this film, I thought I was going to have this in my top 10, top 15. I really liked this film upon initial viewing, and then the more I thought about this movie, I noticed a lot of its flaws. Some of the storytelling's really poor. Some of the decisions made in the third act don't really make a lot of sense on retrospect, but ultimately Edgar Wright has the style, the lighting, the cinematography, the great performances, all of that you know that he can bring some great music as well as obviously Edgar Wright can only do. And it has a lot working for it. It just needed a little bit of a tighter script to be a great movie. Ultimately, it ended up being a good movie. Cary Fukunaga made a really great send-off for Daniel Craig's James Bond. And the biggest criticism I have for this movie, it is that it's over 2 hours and 40 minutes. It's way too long, and there's a lot of sequences that don't matter, but that Cuba sequence in the middle, that beginning 20 minutes work, that last hour deliver on the James Bond you want. And it's a great send-off for a great James Bond actor in Daniel Craig, and it has a lot of fun and emotional weight to it that the good outweighs the bad. Malignant gets the award of the craziest third act sequence I've ever seen in a film recently. The twist that comes with it without ruining it is so shocking, and I wasn't expecting it, and I was kind of captivated from the last 40 minutes on. And from that part, the film worked. After that, it's a really conventional horror pick with some good scares. I'm glad James Wan got to be back in this type of story and make this type of movie. Raya is also a beautifully animated movie with wonderful vocal performances from Kelly Marie Tran and Awkwafina. It is a really standard, conventional story that works because you kind of know the hero's journey, and if it works, it works, and that's what this film does. It works because I like this genre. I loved what they did with the character of Awkwafina, who I thought was, that dragon was so endearing. It has a nice emotional core with it and some great action set pieces throughout with a lot of fun characters sprinkled throughout, that it keeps the runtime light and fun and just captivating the whole time. I was really charmed by Raya in the last year. Broadcast Signal Intrusion stars Harry Shum Jr. and directed by Jacob Gentry. It is a low-budget horror film that has a really cool premise behind it. It almost kind of feels like a journalist movie where you are uncovering the truth along with these characters. I liked the performances. I liked a lot of it. Ultimately, what I have a little bit of an issue with the third act finale. I think where it ends, it leaves a lot left to be desired. Regardless, for its budget and for its showcase of talent, it is a really well done film that I would encourage people to check out. If you had told me that Chris Rock and Samuel L. Jackson were going to star in a Saw movie 5 years ago, I would have thought you were crazy. But this is the reality we live in, a post-COVID world where anything happens and let's just go with it. Spiral from the Book of Saw is a film that I actually found the horror effective. I thought the plot, while definitely heavy-handed, I liked it, and the third act I thought was really well done, and there's some really great traps, but they were never too gory that I lost interest in them, because that's been my issue with the other Saw films. I think it's gore for gore's sake. I thought this one hit first on story and character performances. I think Chris Rock gave a really good performance. Obviously, Samuel Jackson's going to do it, and I thought they put the emphasis on that first, and then the violence and gore came second, which is what I liked about this movie. So ultimately, I really liked Spiral. Ghostbusters Afterlife is a little bit too slow, but when it kicks in, it finally kicks in the second act, and I really enjoyed what this film had to offer. Mackenzie Davis as Franklin granddaughter was a great addition. Paul Rudd's really fun, as Paul Rudd brings that all the time. He's that consistency. And this third act's just really special as a fan of the Ghostbusters franchise, and I loved it, and I think this film had a lot of charm and fun. Emma Stone is incredible as Cruella, and I was captivated from minute one she was on screen to the very end. And luckily she's on screen for basically the whole film, and the costuming's so good. And I thought there was a lot of great supporting characters from Emma Thompson to Paul Walter Hauser that I just enjoyed what this film had to offer. And I thought Craig Gillespie did a great job giving us a film that didn't need to be made but had a lot of fun with it. Disney made a great movie with Encanto. It's not a surprise, you knew they were going to, but this movie has a lot of life and energy, beautiful, vibrant colors, amazing animation, some great vocal performances, and a heartfelt story that I connected with and enjoyed, and it's one of the year's best animated for sure. Shang-Chi and the Legends of the Ten Rings. Now, I've only seen this film once, and I really want to rewatch this film. Ultimately, I was impressed what Simu Lee had to offer, and I thought the supporting cast was great, with Awkwafina surprising me with how much I liked her in this film. It has some really great action set pieces and an emotional core to it that just delivers and delivers in a fun way, and is going to make Shang-Chi one of the new stars of the MCU. Flea is the most personal film to come out in the year 2021. It tells the story of this man who has to flee from his hometown. It's a pretty amazing story. It's a heartbreaking one. And it's, like I said, there's something so personal. And the fact that they decide to tell this documentary through animation is something I think that is so wholly unique. Never seen a film quite like this. I freaking adored Eternals and everything this film had to offer, from its amazing cast that included Salma Hayek, Kamal Nanjiani, Angelina Jolie, Brian Tyree Henry, Richard Madden, Emma Chan. It had a really beautiful special effects to it, with just some of it being just awe-dropping and crazy, some great reveals, a lot of just emotion and heartfelt with Chloe Zhao's direction. It felt like she was making a personal movie of gods being with men and them learning to be human, that it just emotionally engrossed me, and I found myself tearing up in a few of those sequences. Mass is an amazing showcase of talent that Fran Kranz is as a director and writer. This follows 4 parents all connected through this mass shooting, and it's just a film that is an hour and 45 minutes of these characters talking about something that is really uncomfortable. It is extremely hard to watch as an audience member. You feel like you are in the room with them, which is this film's greatest achievement. I can't put this film any higher just because I will remember this film for the rest of my life, and it's too hard to go back and revisit this film. I can't see myself watching this movie again in the future. That is an achievement of the filmmaker here and this cast. James Gunn's The Suicide Squad is one of the most exciting films made of this year. It really just showcases what the comic book genre can be, featuring great performances all around. It's an impressive cast all coming together, and it's all singularly James Gunn's vision. This film is balls to the wall crazy, and it totally understands what this film is. Totally, it's comedic, and it's just filled with great action. And at the heart of it is this beautiful look into humanity and characters learning to coexist with each other and form a family in the most unlikely way possible. I said Titan was the craziest film of 2021. I lied. Annette is the craziest film of 2021. I've never seen a film quite like this. It does follow Adam Driver as this huge comedian, and this relationship that he has with his girlfriend turned wife. It is this rock opera, just glorious mess and mishmash of genres that I've never seen quite a film like this. And just for the swing this film took, I respected the hell out of this movie. Free Guy was my most pleasant surprise of the year 2021. I thought this movie was so charming. I had a blast. The comedy's there, the action's there, the character is there, and the story is there. This is one of the most rewatchable films of 2021. Nicolas Cage gives a great performance in the lead. This is maybe his best performance he's ever given in his career, and he's given a lot of great performances. What he is able to do as an actor to display humanity, vulnerability, fear, it is so impressive, and it's one that is just an achievement in watching. You just feel like you're watching something special. This film is that. It's something special. Tick, Tick, Boom, directed by Lin-Manuel Miranda, is, I think, the best directorial debut actor of this year. This movie's incredible. Andrew Garfield gives a great performance. The music is catchy based on the play Tick, Tick, Boom, written by Jonathan Larson. This film just gets to explore a period of time and a creator and artist that I had no clue about, and I was just enamored by it the whole time. So we are here in my top 10, and I'm going to be doing my own separate top 10 video for the best movies of 2021. So I'm going to just list them through real quick. That way you have an idea of what this list is completed, what it looks like from 1 to 80, but I'm not going to go into any real detail for 1 through 10. So kicking it off, 10 is the film Nobody with Bob Odenkirk. Just an awesome action movie with great action and a great leading performance from Bob Odenkirk. That was surprising. Number 9 is Nightmare Alley, which was just, it hit a tone that I love so much. I thought Guillermo del Toro's direction was so atmospheric, and I thought the story was impressive. I liked what this film had to offer. Number 8 is Licorice Pizza. Paul Thomas Anderson directs a beautiful movie with a lot of complexity to its story and a lot of stuff that I think is going to deter audiences from watching it. I think what he does in this movie is something really unique and special and speaks on nostalgia that is bad. I just loved what this movie had to offer. Ride the Eagle, starring Jake Johnson, just to me continues to prove how good of a leading man Jake Johnson is. I was just impressed with this movie, and I thought it was so sweet, but in a way that never felt like it was trying to make you feel emotion. It just felt like a natural story, so I loved it for that. My number 6 is Dune, and Dune is a movie that will certainly go up higher once Dune Part 2 comes out, because the biggest issue I had with the film is the final 20 minutes just kind of cut off, and I kind of a little bit more resolution to it. Once Part 2 comes out, that's going to deal with that problem. This film for me was like watching what I'd have to assume audiences felt like when watching the first Lord of the Rings Fellowship of the Ring movie. It took me 2 viewings to really appreciate it, but once I got it and once I connected with this movie, I connected to it, and it's one of the best of the year. My 5th favorite movie of the year is Our Friend, starring Casey Affleck, Dakota Johnson, and Jason Segel. Now, Jason Segel, to me, delivers the best supporting performance of the year, for sure. What he is able to do in this movie is he is able to kind of guide us through a really tragic cancer story and give it life and humanity, levity. I think what he does is so complex in this movie, and it's such a beautiful look into friendship, and it really got to show Jason Segel's acting chops, and I hope we see more of it. Zack Snyder's Justice League is just one of the most important films to come out in 2021. This was a fan-pushed project, a vision that they wanted to see, and one that I think ultimately delivered and redeemed what was Joss Whedon's terrible Justice League movie. This movie is great, it's wonderful, it's epic, it has a lot of just fan service, but never just for fan service stakes. It moves the story, and it's ambitious, and it's a great middle finger to Joss Whedon, which, based on what we've learned these past few weeks, well deserved. F you, Joss Whedon. Number 3 is the film Spencer, starring Kristen Stewart. The reason I love this movie is I think it's really well done, beautifully directed, amazing costuming, And it just has the best performance of the year from Kristen Stewart. She captures the essence of Princess Diana so well, and I was so enamored watching her on screen. But it's not simply an impression, it is one that goes into the psyche of this character. I was so invested in what she was doing in this film, and I love this movie, and I can't wait to revisit it. Coming in at number 2 is Spider-Man No Way Home. How was I not going to put this movie on my list? I love Spider-Man. I loved what this movie had. It was full of thrills. I love this movie. I will be watching scenes from this movie for the rest of my life. And my number 1 film of 2021 is Coda. I thought Coda was beautiful. I thought it was able to capture something sweet, something real, something dramatic, something funny, and just all that comes in with life. And it showed me it showcased a part of life that I never get to experience or see. And I was just blown away by this movie, and I thought it was so endearing and so sweet. And it's the movie that made me feel the most, and ended up falling in love with this movie. Coda is my favorite film of 2021. And that's it. That is my list. Now, there are some movies that I missed that hopefully by Oscar season I will have seen. I have not gotten the chance to see West Side Story yet. I have not gotten the chance to see Belfast yet. I know Kingsman is coming out to Hulu in February, so I'll definitely be checking that film out. Yeah, that's my list for the year of 2021. And there also were a few that I have seen, but I just didn't know how to talk about that. Nomadland I considered a 2020 release, which is why it's not brought up in this, because I saw it pre-2021, even though I think it technically got released theatrically in 2021, but it did qualify for last year's Oscars. Film that I was weighing, should I talk about it, but ultimately I just didn't feel like it was truly a film. It was The Beatles Get Back. I didn't know how to talk about this film in the context of all these other films. It is wonderful, and if I had to rate it, it would definitely be in my top 10, because I love the Beatles and I love what they captured in this movie. But again, just didn't make sense to put it on this list. But anyway, that's my top 80 movies of 2021, or I should say all the movies I saw in 2021. So guys, thank you for listening. I know this was a long video, but that's the year of 2021 wrapped up. I'll be releasing my top 10 films of 2021 sometime soon. And yeah, thanks for listening. Take care. And remember to like and subscribe and leave your comments in the section below. Thank you guys. Peace out. Make sure to check out Ben and Brand See a Movie, airing every Friday at 9 a.m. Take care, guys. Bye-bye.